I was talking to a company recently, an organization recently, and we talked about the term salary compression, which is really what's happening right now. So salary compression, for those that haven't heard that term before, it's a natural thing that happens in economic cycles. And the idea is that people that stay in the same place for a long period of time and their 3% raises will end up getting paid less than people they have to bring in the marketplace. In some cases, it's so extreme that you'll have a manager getting paid less money than the person that they're managing.
Welding together practical insights and powerful conversations to forge world-class leaders. This is the Leadership Foundry Podcast.
Randy, my friend, we've got a new Leadership Foundry Podcast today. This one's going to be a little different than our normal podcast where we interview leaders. This is going to be you and I taking on a question. And this question has to do with the Great Resignation, which I know you and I have been hearing a lot about, both from employees as well as leaders. So let me read the question to you, and then I'd love to get your first cut at this. So here's the question. I've been following your podcast and the Leadership Foundry for quite some time. I was hoping you might discuss the topic on one of your podcasts, as I believe it's an industry-wide issue we're all facing. Why are our colleagues leaving our company? My company specifically is seeing a large increase in colleagues leaving, and especially colleagues that have been with the company for 5 to 7 years. And it's not always for the same reason. Some want to switch industries, some aren't the right fit, others move laterally to competitors, and some have left because they're asked to leave based on performance. My question is this: is it time to do a self-reflection of our team and culture? And if so, how do we do that? I'm struggling to grasp if this is an internal problem or if this is a consequence of the world we're living in right now. I really enjoy working for my company and my team, and it's hard for me to grasp why others do not. Whatever the root cause is for people leaving, I'd love for us to do the best we can to attract and keep our talented team intact. I know that when a trusted colleague leaves, no matter what reason, it causes the rest of the team to question their own loyalty to the company. Do you have any advice on how to address this issue?
That's a great question.
That's a really great question. So, what do you think? What are some of the things that you see as reasons why people are leaving? So maybe we can start first on the employee side, and then we can flip a little bit and talk about the leader side.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a two-parter. So, as with most of the conversations we have, our evidence is anecdotal. So as I think about all the conversations I've had, all the stories we've heard, these are some things that come to mind. During the pandemic, we were forced to live and work differently, very differently. It was a shock to the system for everyone.
Yeah.
So you've got suddenly millions of people working out of their homes, which by itself was just a very stressful situation. We're trying to do life and do work in that particular environment. So that was difficult, and people had to deal with that. I think people were asked to do more with less. They were asked to take on more responsibilities, not necessarily for more income. And I think that one of the things that you and I talk about a lot with our clients is business relationships. I think that the disconnect of having to work virtually, and I know people have done their very best to try to stay connected virtually, it's not the same. So I think those three ingredients really just led to this growing pressure out in the workforce. And then this is something that I think we both have seen because we've been in business for a while. Every now and then you see sort of a seismic shift. And the shift that I've noticed is it's gone from maybe 3-4 years ago, an employer-centric workplace to now an employee-centric workplace. And what I mean by that is employees now have the power. And I think as you think about the Great Resignation, they felt that power. They felt like they actually had options, and they left in droves. They just said, I've had enough. It's time to move on. And they felt confident that they could find something else. Some of them had the financial means to maybe take some time, take a break, and move on. But I think those factors plus people feeling their power really led to this. So on the employee side, that's what I see. How about you?
I totally agree with that. And I think that you made some good points that we're asked to do a lot more with less, a lot of that pressure and strain. In addition, you lose that feeling of connection and support because we're working all virtually. So and I agree with all that. I see all that too. Here's what I'm curious about. All of a sudden, it seems like employees are getting offered a lot bigger packages than they were getting before. here's one of my thoughts on why that might be, but I'd love to get your perspective on it too. So some companies, when the pandemic hit, they just said, we've got to just lay off a bunch of folks or furlough a bunch of folks. So they did. They just kind of cut down to the bone. And they held that position for 6 months, 9 months, a year, and then decided, okay, we need to come out of this. And then they started hiring back. And I think largely it was some of those companies which started to create more of the uptick in salaries and bonuses because they needed to lure people away. But I'm sure there's other factors. What have you seen as the reason why people are getting offered so much more? Because you and I both know clients, we're not talking offered 5% more or 10% more to leave. We're talking significantly more to go jump, and it's hard to turn that away. So I'm wondering what you see as possible reasons for that.
So I'll answer your question by first saying I'm not an economist, but I'll do my best to answer. So one of the things I would say is we were actually having a phenomenal economy in the United States prior to the pandemic. It was some of the best economic activity we've had in decades. So we were in a really good place economically. The pandemic hit, and we just kind of shut down for a period of time, and then we figured out how to do business during the pandemic. And people stayed with that. They had no choice. They were worried about their livelihoods. It was an interesting, weird time. I've never seen anything like it. Well, I think as we get into the Great Resignation and people started leaving, some of them, as I said, had figured out financially how they could maybe disconnect from the workforce. They were under a lot of pressure. They wanted to leave. So they left. And they weren't coming back anytime soon. They wanted to take 3 months off, 6 months off. Some people retired early. You and I both know people in the late 50s, early 60s that said, I'm done now. So a lot of talented people took off either permanently or for long periods of time, and there was no getting them back for any amount of money. So that talent leaves the workforce. Well, what's also going on under the surface is the economy is coming back. The economy started roaring back. We lost all this talent, very experienced talent, and in that age bracket of maybe 50 to early 60s are a lot of senior level leaders. So they leave, people get promoted to move up, and then there's this gap underneath them. So to answer your question, I think we lost this huge group of people, and when folks really needed that talent, they had to go out and buy it, and that's why I think you've seen these huge packages. I know some of the numbers you're talking about. It's crazy money that has been thrown at people to get them to come over. And quite frankly, the retention bonuses, companies are recognizing we not only need to hire talent, we better make sure we keep the talent we've got. And the retention bonuses have been through the roof as well. So that's my take on it. How about you?
No, I think you're right. And I think that, I was talking to a company recently, an organization recently, and we talked about the term salary compression, which is really what's happening right now. So salary compression, for those that haven't heard that term before, it's a natural thing that happens in economic cycles. And the idea is that people that stay in the same place for a long period of time and their 3% raises will end up getting paid less than people they have to bring in the marketplace. In some cases, it's so extreme that you'll have a manager getting paid less money than the person that they're managing. It happens a lot in consulting firms. They'll go out in a hot market, they have to go get these senior consultants. They end up offering them more money than the manager who's managing them. So it causes issues. So in that case, there can be healthy reasons why you might want to make some moves. And people in their 20s often use moving to increase their salary in a very rapid way. That said, and here's where I'm going to flip it back to you.
Sure.
I don't think employees should necessarily consider money as the only factor when they do this.
Oh, I totally agree.
Because you and I have both met clients over the years that went for the shiny dollar, realizing there was a reason why they were getting paid the shiny dollar. They walked into a real hot mess that they had to either clean up, or there was just a lot of pressure or unhealthy environment. So when people are looking at should I leave or not, what are some of the factors that you think they should consider?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I don't think I've made a career decision based on money since I was 28 years old. So that was 28 years ago. So I totally agree with you. I think people should not just evaluate the pay package. And this is a really interesting sort of two-sided coin. I think that companies often think, I just need to throw money at the problem. So their number one priority is we just need to buy that talent and bring it back in. And I think they're operating from an incorrect assumption. And to your point, I think employees need to be very thoughtful about, is it just the money? Are there other things I want? right now what I'm hearing and what I'm reading is people want work-life balance. They want flexibility. They want that hybrid work environment. I mean, you and I are two examples. We're guys that have gone from the office to loving our kind of virtual world and working in a hybrid way. Yeah. So I think that, that benefits. But there's something, and this might be a good segue for us, there's something at the core of this that I think is really missing. I wrote a blog post at the beginning of the year, and it was titled, 3 Things That Every Leader Should Be Doing Right Now. And the 3 things that they should be doing, and don't be fooled by the simplicity of what I'm about to say, but the 3 things that every leader should be doing is asking, listening, and investing. And those are 3 things they need to be doing with their teams. And they need to really ask their team members, what do you need from me? What do you need from me right now? What is it that is missing in your career? What do you need in your development? And really listen to the answers. Don't ask a question like, are you guys doing okay? Okay, great, thanks. Now, it's got to be a really deep question, specific question. You need to listen actively on multiple levels. And then, and this is the key point, you need to be willing to invest in your people. And that's where I'm going with this, is that people want to be invested in. You and I have known this for decades. People want to be invested in. And when they feel like they're invested in, that you care about them, you care about their careers, they're much more likely to stay. I think that's the number one reason.
So let me clarify something you said, sure. Invested in. And when you're saying that, and I know you well enough to know, you're not talking about money.
Absolutely.
And so what are some things, when you say invested, what are ways that we invest in our employees?
It can be leadership programs. It can be, I want to help you get that MBA. I want to give you a mentor inside the company. I want to get a coach for you and give you a coach. You and I engage with companies every day that make that investment in their people. So finding some way to help them figure out how to be better leaders, to grow skills, whatever it is, but it's that personal development that is tailored to what they want to get out of their careers. That's what's missing. And I really think if people would just listen to the old adage, it's been out there forever, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. Right. They leave bosses. And if people would just understand that and operate from that, life would be a lot better. You and I wouldn't have a lot of employment. But I do think this idea of investment, and people want to be invested in, especially the new generations entering the workforce. I believe data says that's like the number one thing they want.
Yeah, number one.
Now that's my take. What's your
agreed. And I think that it's both simple and also complicated, because the leaders that we're asking to do this also want the same thing.
Exactly.
From their leaders.
Exactly.
And you've heard we both talked about this, and it's the thing that you hear me said millions of times. We live in a world where time's our most precious resource. It's not money, and everything feels urgent all the time. So we're like heads down. We've got our blinders on. We're just focusing on our work because we have so much of it, and we either don't have the time, or more likely, we're not making the time to invest in our people. And so we're just throwing money at it, hoping it solves the problem. But I think that going back to what you said earlier, one of the reasons why people are leaving now is they've lost that sense of connection. I had a client of mine, and she said, my community was always my place of work. Yeah. And she named the name of the company. Yeah. She said, that's where my people are, that's my community. Come home to my family, but that was really my community. She said, when the pandemic hit and I was working from home with my husband and my 2 kids, my community became my husband and my 2 kids. And then work just became work. It lost that sense of community. And now she's totally open to any new opportunities that might come her way, because there's not that connection.
But I think you're talking about something that's really profound, and yet we don't hear enough about this. Leaders have to change the way they lead, kind of based on market conditions, based on the reality of what's going on. And when the pandemic hit and people did what your colleague, your friend just said, I learned that my husband and my kids are the community. They started recognizing, wow, I need to put more focus here. I actually like my hybrid schedule. I love that I'm able to do my job and pick up the kids. Because before, if he or she was at work 8 to 5, maybe that wasn't a possibility. And I think when people started to be forced to do it and then started to enjoy it and really relish it, that's a huge shift in thinking. I'm not sure leaders really picked up on that. I'm not sure that the leaders we've engaged with and worked with for years, smart people, capable people, have always noticed that right under their feet, the landscape has shifted. And I think people are not willing to go back to the way it was. And they will make choices on their careers based on the ability to do that.
I think you're right. So great last question I think that we can use to kind of end our conversation here and put a
Sure.
bow on it. And this is one you and I can both kind of go back and forth on. Let's talk about what is essential for leadership today. What are the traits that leaders need to be operating with today to be effective in terms of keeping, retaining, and even attracting talent?
So the way I would answer that is, in a minute, I probably would go back to my ask, listen, and invest mantra. But I would actually here's some pre-work. I would encourage leaders to think about operating out of an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. Now, that language has been around forever. I didn't invent it. But when leaders operate from an abundance mindset, as stressed as they are, as busy as they are, as leaders, we have an obligation to serve our people well, to serve our teams well. So we always need to be thinking, as much as I've got going on, what can I do to best serve my people? And if we operate from an abundance mindset, we are going to show up as leaders who ask, listen, and invest and care. But if we operate from the scarcity mindset, we're always thinking about, I'm overwhelmed, I've got too much going on. If I give you a piece of my pie, that's less pie for me. And I'm oversimplifying it because sometimes I think all of us are human, right? And we can feel that scarcity mindset. It's a human thing. But as leaders, the challenge I would issue is try to think about operating from abundance, because when you do, you're always going to be willing to ask the great questions, you're going to listen really well, and you're going to make the investment that your teams want from you. That's my take.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. As you were talking, I was thinking to myself, what are some other just good leadership communication approaches that leaders need to be taking today? I think being clear on expectations and trying to get as much clarity as what they're expecting, but also making it a two-way street, to your point around listening. And what do you expect from me? What can I be doing to support you better? And then trusting them. There's that kind of empowerment element too. And micromanaging is definitely not going to play well today. It never really played well before, but I don't think it's going to play well today. So being trusting around allowing your people to take on the tasks that they need to be doing and allowing them to author to you so you can edit a little bit more in that relationship. I think that's really, really important.
And as executive coaches and consultants who do this work with the Leadership Foundry, we also talk to our clients a lot about practicing self-care. As a leader, we're not just challenging you to serve better, lead better. That's all part of the mix. But take care of yourself. You've got to put the oxygen mask on your own face first. So practice self-care. So if you are doing that, you are going to have the energy and the ability and the desire and more passion to go out and serve your team. You got to take care of yourself.
So Randy, that's a really good point. And I'm going to kind of end at least my portion of this with that. Because I think that's so important. If we assume, let's just assume that employees really want this balance and they want to be in an environment that they work hard, but they want rest time too.
Yes.
Right? More like interval training. I'm going to do heavy sprints during the week, rest of the weekend, heavy sprints during the week. As leaders, you can't just give that lip service.
Right.
So I was doing a 360 interview for a leader this week, and they said, if I was to ask any one thing of this leader, I'd want him to actually take his vacation. He always is great about telling me to take my vacation, but he never takes his. So it makes me feel bad when I take mine. So I think leaders taking their vacation, leaders perfectly fine to work on the weekends, but schedule your emails to go out on Mondays.
Build parameters, build.
Yeah, so you're not constantly hitting your employees with emails on Friday nights and Saturday mornings and Saturday night and Sunday morning and Sunday night, because when they get that email, they feel an obligation to respond and work too. So you're not giving them that break. So I think leaders practicing self-care and modeling it is also going to be the leadership approach that's going to really attract and retain talent today.
Yes.
Because if people feel like their leader really, really cares about them holistically, I think that's going to be the winning strategy. And I think that term holistic has been corrupted a little bit. I think that people assume, oh, are you asking me as a leader now I have to learn everyone's life story and attend to all of their needs and emotions? Not necessarily. But I do think you want to be careful about them as a human and care for them as a human. And how do you model that? I think that's one thing I would kind of end with.
Yeah, I totally agree. Everything you said is right on. And I think just, also leaders being willing to be vulnerable. We always talk about the most attractive trait in any leader is vulnerability. We'd love to see leaders who are willing to say, I don't have all the answers. I'm struggling. Hey, it's been really hard for me too. And let your team see you as human. I just thought of a great topic for a future show.
Oh, yeah?
We should talk about leadership guilt. What makes leaders feel guilty? Stay tuned.
That's really good. That's good, Randy. Well, speaking of stay tuned, let's stay tuned to see how this plays out.
Yes.
How long this Great Resignation is going to play out, where the talent eventually comes from, because we're going to need to plug some of these holes.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, as you and I know, there'll be a new leadership challenge right around the corner.
I think we're up for it.
Welding together practical insights and powerful conversations to forge world-class leaders. This is the Leadership Foundry Podcast.